All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, oftentimes in life, when people start to tell you the unabashed truth about how they feel about situations, it's because they believe that they're starting to have nothing to lose. Why is that? Because they're no longer as invested as they once were, because they find their modes of thinking starting to become obsolete. Why am I bringing this up? Because Greg Popovich, for those of you brothers who remember, the last championship that he won was because of the dominance of the three-point shot on his San Antonio Spurs squad. They basically shot the Miami Heat out of the building in 2014. That 2014 Spurs squad was one of the best championship teams that I've ever seen. And in this current incarnation of the NBA, which is relatively three-point happy, they were as good as any team that I've seen outside of the super team of the Golden State Warriors back in 2017. That 2014 Spurs squad may have been, other than the 2017 Warriors, the best team of this decade. So it's funny to me now that Greg Popovich is starting to understand his coaching mortality. All of a sudden, he wants to talk about how much he hates the three-point shot. So anyway, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Let's talk a little Spurs, because they host the Rockets in the first part of our doubleheader on ESPN tonight. And I really got to read you what Greg Popovich told NBA.com about the three-point explosion in the NBA over the past decade. And mind you, they're playing the Rockets tonight. Here's what Pop said, quote, "I hate it, but I always have. I've hated the three for 20 years. Now you look at a stat sheet after a game, and the first thing you look at is the threes. If you made threes and the other team didn't, you win. If you don't even look at rebounds or turnovers, you don't even care. That's how much impact the three-point shot has and how it's evidenced by how everyone played."
In other words, he hates the Golden State Warriors and what they've done to his precious game. That's what that means. It's almost like getting into the boxing ring with a fighter who's not particularly great when it comes to the craft of the sweet science, but he has dynamite power in both hands. What he can do is he can nullify someone who may have trained in the idiosyncrasies of the sweet science of the art of boxing, and all he has to do is tap him one time with something potent. And all of that skill and that craft goes right out the window. We just saw a possible example of that, or a potential example of that, this past weekend with Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. Fury outboxed him basically 10 out of the 12 rounds. But for 2 rounds, Deontay Wilder almost put him to sleep. Greg Popovich knows that when you're facing a team that's dominant from three, it takes away a lot from a lot of the machinations that set great coaches apart from average coaches.
Plays. So, Scotty, he's basically saying that all the final points of the game kind of fall by the wayside if you can just bury the other team in threes. Do you agree?
I do agree. I mean, I think that's been a huge advantage for the Golden State Warriors over the last 3 seasons.
Absolutely. If you took away the three-point line, the Golden State Warriors, they suddenly become a good team, but not a transcendent team.
Seasons is the fact that they've been able to shoot the three ball better than any team in the league, and we've seen teams like Houston who's emerged a little bit, and now we got the Milwaukee Bucks who's taking the most attempts. So the three ball is the way that the game is going, and if anyone can speak on this, Coach Pop can, because I'm sure he's probably losing a little bit of his coaching feel over there with guys shooting the ball. It's more.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scottie Pippen. See, Greg Popovich, he can't get as much credit as he used to get now, because basically many of these NBA contests are just three-point shooting contests now.
More of a free-flow game now. When I played in the league, three-point shot was important, but it wasn't that important. In today's game, you got to get up almost 5 threes a quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, or you're going to find yourself behind.
Rachel, I seem to remember a very hot night in San Antonio when Danny Green was raining in threes.
Really hot. Really hot.
Absolutely. Danny Green was great in the 2013 finals. In the 2014 finals, Miami was just getting blitzkrieged by everybody.
Really hot.
And then raining in more threes.
Really hot. It's almost as if the air conditioner was broken.
Yes. The Spurs won a championship in large part because they hit threes. I would just say to Pop, maybe grow the beard back. He's been cranky.
You really miss that beard.
I do, and he's been cranky.
By the way, he's been cranky long before he shaved his beard, and I say that
cranky.
as someone who loves Greg's crankiness.
We all do. But he also said that he doesn't think the game has lost its beauty in that same interview.
I agree with that. At one time, the game of basketball had more nuance. Different teams played according to the style pertaining to their roster. Now everybody just wants to play the same way. Everybody wants to make three-point shots, no matter who you have on your team. And if you don't have three-point shooters, okay, we got to get a whole bunch of three-point shooters. That's why nobody could really beat the Warriors, because everybody's trying to out-Warrior them. You have to take what the Warriors do, maybe, try to implement some components of what they do because they're so successful, but try to get them to play in a style different from how they normally play. It's going to be very difficult in this era because you can't become as physical as teams in previous eras would try to do, especially on high-flying teams. But still, it would be nice if there was more variance in how these teams play all across the NBA. Everybody just plays the same style of basketball, and it seems to be just a continuous three-point shooting contest every game.
I just disagree. I think the game is beautiful. In fact, his mentor, Hank Egan, who was his coach at Air Force, I had a conversation with him a little while ago, and he said, he's been coaching since the 60s. He goes, the game has never been more beautiful. So, Pop.
I would disagree with that. I think that the game was a tad bit more beautiful from about the late 80s to the early 90s. Mid to late 90s into the early 2000s, it got ugly. And a lot of brothers disagree with me on this. I really don't give a shit. The game was just way too bogged down with over physicality. You had a lot of big brutes in the league back then whose only job it was to clog the lane. The scores were 72-70. People try to act like that was great basketball because they want to romanticize the past. Right now, I think the game is a little bit too offensive. They could reel it back a little bit. But I would say that the free-flowing style of today is more appealing than what it was in the early 2000s, late 90s. But I understand where Popovich is going when he says that it's not beautiful anymore. I won't say that it's not beautiful anymore. It's just not as beautiful as it once was when you had the diversity of styles, as was very apparent circa 1990, 91, 92, 93. When you could have a Phoenix Suns team with Charles Barkley face the Seattle Supersonics with Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp. And sometimes they would hit threes, sometimes they would go in the low post, sometimes they dunk on you, mid-range, things of that nature. Now everything today is just 3, 3, 3, 3, 3.
Pop, get a bottle of wine, go see Coach Egan. Have a conversation about the beauty of the game. It'll be great for everybody.
Well, I agree with you on that point for sure. I do understand, though, that there is room for the nuance of, hey, the bludgeon, the hammer of the three-pointer. One thing Pop has been so great at over the decades is finding all those little untucked corners of the game to get an advantage. And it's been fun to watch him do that.
He's also very frustrated because with the new rules changes and how the NBA has de-emphasized defense, how can he make up the talent disparity between his team, the Spurs, and a team like the Golden State Warriors or even the Denver Nuggets or the Houston Rockets? Because the Spurs don't have any superstars. They have a star in DeMar DeRozan. They have another borderline star in LaMarcus Aldridge. But when you square off against teams that have stars or superstars, the only way for you to make up that gap is to be very physical defensively. And the NBA is not going to allow that anymore. That's really what he's frustrated about.
And those just aren't as available anymore when someone can come sweep you along with a three-point shot.
That's
I get that part.
He's definitely lost the edge.
Well, some of that.
When you have two Hall of Famers, David Robinson and then follow with Tim Duncan, those guys made that three-point line very fruitful.
That's what he misses. He misses those guys.
So when you don't have that magnet there that can force that defense to draw in, that three-point shot does become a little bit more difficult. So he definitely don't have those bigs out there.
That same way, for sure.
Agreed.
For sure. I want to hit our league.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. It's going to be very interesting to see what Greg Popovich decides to do at the end of this season. I think that he's very bitter about a bevy of things, starting with Kawhi Leonard, but also these rule changes in the NBA. So it would not surprise me if he decides to step down after this season. But we'll see what happens. So peace.